Great. Did everybody get a chance to share? Thumbs up if you got a chance. Everybody got a chance to give their what they wonder? I don't see some thumbs. Come on.
They're scribbling furiously in San Francisco. I can see them scribbling.
I can see that. Okay, great. So we're going to go through the same process and go around and have each site share. And just so you know, I'm going to go through the same order every time when I ask sites to share. And so we're going to start with Monterey. If you can share what your group wonders about inquiry-based learning and facilitation.
Hi there. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. We wonder really about how do we ask those critical questions. So it's a how to ask, what to ask, how do we move into more intentional inquiry-based programming in general, and for what subject areas. We're also wondering too, what is the systemic process to get to the end result? If we know we want to deepen students' level of understanding and broaden their discovery, is there a process that we should be following along to get there? And what's the demonstrated evidence when we get to the end of our program utilizing inquiry-based method? And then there was also a question about the utilization of the process with English language learners, and are there questions, for example, that are more appropriate for various levels of student knowledge and expertise? Okay.
Great. Thank you, Monterey. Santa Clara.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Good morning. We want to know who and where are the best resources for inquiry-based learning, how to be more effective in asking the right questions, and teaching our staff how to ask the questions as well as students. What is considered age appropriate? Who's doing it well? What are the identified benefits and outcomes so we can share with others? How much time does it take, and how can we embed it in other areas during after-school programming, and how to make it more student-centered? Any others? Thank you.
Thank you, Santa Clara.
The lightning round. Who's next?
San Mateo.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our discussion, we talked about, what would be the best environment obviously after school programs are a fertile territory for these more open-ended, inquiry-based types of strategies, and how do we improve that. And then we also talked about how might we prepare line staff and teachers for this open-ended type of inquiry-based work. So we're wondering how we might do that, because this inquiry type of teaching takes more work than the stand and deliver, somebody who's just transmitting content knowledge. So our conversation had a lot to do with that.
Thank you, San Mateo. Alameda?
Hi, we're here. People are sitting. I just got delegated. Okay. Oh, thank you. We got somebody who was in the group. Yay. Coming on.
Kind of said all of ours. Just reiterating.
Well.
Okay, say it better. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we have on this side what age is suggested, resources. How do we engage shy students? How do we educate children with no prior knowledge? Breakdown for ELL students, engage students to want to ask questions. On this side, we have ways to encourage students, engage students. Same thing, how do we guide student questions? Good facilitator techniques. Do questions / activities, is that what you guys are doing? Yeah. Okay, have to relate to state standards, and how can we engage its age appropriateness? Same thing again.
And I'll add in that, because I was on that side of the room, that people were concerned about how easy it is to steer student questions, like, how to really encourage their questions so it's not adults steering them towards certain answers or formulating adult questions or influencing them so that it's really their thinking and their questions.
Thank you, Alameda County, I should say. Thank you, Alameda County. San Francisco City College.
Hi. What we wonder about inquiry-based learning is how do we engage all kids to have questions and letting them know that it's okay not to arrive at the answers during that specified amount of time that they have to work on a project during the after-school time. How do we encourage kids to wander outside the classroom and transfer that inquiry-based thinking into other academic areas or just overall areas? How do we afford the supplies to adequately provide this inquiry-based learning activity? And lastly, how do we train staff to lead inquiry-based learning experiences for children?
Thank you. Emeryville, you're on.
I'll read this on. Thank you. Are we on already? How far off track can or do you let students get? How do you keep the learners focused? Is there a method of facilitation? How can you be strategic in selecting things for kids to discover? How does this connect to higher learning, college thinking, or expectations?
Great. Thank you, Emeryville. And Solano.
We have, how do you get your target base? How do you get the right participants? The source of topic for inquiry, and then the authenticity of inquiry and guiding the students to what they need to know. So if they're going to be inquiring, there is still a point where students have things that they have to really learn and be taught, but how do you kind of guide them to that form of inquiry? And then also how to support the coordinators in the after-school program so that they can work with students, say middle school students, and then also how to be specific in the inquiry.
Thank you, Solano. So those are a lot of things that we wonder, and I'm really excited to go through the rest of this workshop and then be able to reflect on these things and see if we've gotten some answers and just get the process started of thinking about these things and where to find the answers if you don't get them all today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move on. So can everybody see this?
I don't know.
Okay.
We could ask them.
Can everybody see the PowerPoint? I don't know. No, we got a no. Thumbs up if you can see it, thumbs down if you cannot.
All thumbs down.
All thumbs down.
Good thing we have paper out there.
Perfect. So everybody has their handouts. And so throughout you'll see different URLs for you to use as resources, and I'll talk about them briefly as we go through. And then we'll be doing a couple more activities as well, and then I'll talk about how Girls Inc. implements these strategies and how it relates to STEM that we're doing in our programs.
So we're on slide number 5, the one that says, what is inquiry at the top if you want to follow along, and we'll try and remind you every time we go to the next slide.
Yes, thank you. So when we're talking about inquiry, we're going to focus on really gaining an understanding of what inquiry-based learning is. We add that word based because we want to make sure that it's not inquiry only. And how to facilitate it and support it in and out of school or in out of school time. So summer program, after school program. And we also want to gain a better understanding of the learning model, and so when you use inquiry-based training, it's really about co-learning and learning with the students. One thing I really like about the inquiry-based approach is that, especially with STEM educators, you don't have to be the professional. You don't have to come into the classroom, or you don't have to hire people who have STEM background necessarily, because you want them to be more of a guide on the side. You want them to be learning with the students and asking questions together and going through these processes together. And one quote I really like that I read somewhere, sorry I don't have specifics, is when learners drive the learning, they're much more engaged. And so when you're a participant and you're asking questions and you're coming to these conclusions, you're much more engaged. And So one thing to think about is when we did this this know and wonder activity, I didn't facilitate anything. I didn't guide any. I asked one question and everybody came up with the answers. And so that's something you can take into your program if you need somewhere to start. That's a great way to start for facilitators, especially if they're new frontline staff, if they don't know how to ask questions. Just ask one question, go through that, what do you know? And the students will just start talking. And you will have those shy students that won't know what to say next, and it's all about, at that, then you go into the how do you ask follow-up questions, and we'll go into an activity about follow-up questions in a little bit. And so also as an inquiry-based facilitator, you really want to create an environment where students are allowed to act on their own curiosity. We want to make sure we're not stifling their questions or their opportunities for learning, and still have those skills of open-ended questions. So there is preparation in making sure you have those questions prepared, and at the same time you really want to go with what the students are providing and what they're giving you. And really being flexible, as if you're a supervisor of direct service staff or frontline staff, if you're overseeing a site, making sure that you're also supporting staff in being flexible, because it's really hard when you're in the classroom to be flexible, because you want things to go a certain way. You want to make sure you reach your end result or you meet your objective, and it's really a skill to be flexible. It's a hireable skill to be flexible. And so in speaking to a couple of colleagues in preparing for this workshop, we talked about how the Bay Area is really the hub of inquiry-based learning. There's a lot of inquiry-based learning and facilitation that goes on, and a lot of resources. So we're really lucky to have a lot of resources out here. And so we want to make sure as out-of-school time professionals, especially in the STEM fields, as informal STEM professionals, we want to focus on the base piece, inquiry-based and not inquiry only, because we're asking for information, but we're guiding the students into a direction. You'll hear me say guide on the side.
In San Francisco.
Okay, we hear guide on the side a lot, and we want to make sure that that we're the guide on the side, because once you just let the students go where they're going to go, then you lose your focus and you start to talk about what happened last week on the street instead of the science project that we're doing or oobleck that you're making in program. So you really want to make sure that you're still prepared as the facilitator or supporting your frontline staff to be prepared to guide the students but still using questions. So we have a question in San Francisco.
Oh, hey, Kourtney, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. So just a follow-up question to the opening exercise about, what do you know and what do you wonder? So what is your take on when students come up with either conflicting things about what they know, and what happens in that opening exercise when they come up with things that they know that is not true, that is actually not, like things about, there was one for like a snail inquiry that I did many years ago, and it was like, snails eat chocolate. And, that was something that, somebody just knew. So how do you address things like that come up in inquiry where, when you start with something like, what do you already know?
That's a great question. You always, so in that activity, which we're going to finish at the end, you always want to go back to what you learned, and that's when you're able to go back and kind of reference. So did we learn that snails eat chocolate? Is that something we learned about today? And what do they really eat? And so you'll use the strategies and the skills. You have to finish that activity. You can't just do the know and the wonder and not go into the learn, because when you go into the learn, then you'll go back and talk about and revisit what they already know and what they wonder. And you, as a facilitator, will be able to redirect. You don't want to take the approach of this is wrong because that's not a youth development approach. It's not necessarily appropriate. But you do want to redirect their answers. And if in the moment, if you know that students are going to take what they heard and run with it, then you can redirect it immediately, and that's okay as a facilitator.
Can I say something too? I want to add one more thing also, which is in answer to that, which is I heard a couple of groups mention that when we do inquiry, we're looking for observable evidence. And so if somebody says to me that snails eat chocolate, if I don't I want to try to set up a condition where we could collect observable evidence. So if we put a snail next to some chocolate, and the snail actually ate the chocolate, then I guess we would have to say that we know that's true. But if we put the snail next to the chocolate and they didn't, then we would have observable evidence to the contrary. It also might be a good opportunity to talk about, like the next generation science standards are encouraging us, what scientists do in real life, which is collecting one piece of data usually isn't enough to reach a conclusion. So if a kid says he saw it once, that would be an opportunity to talk about how real scientists work and maybe try it with a whole bunch of different snails and see what happens.
And that was Bruce, for those of you who did not see him because the camera was on me.
Yeah,
and I was speaking
sorry.
this way. Great. Okay. So the resources, the URLs listed on your slide 5 is the 4-H Science in Urban Communities and the Exploratoriums approach, which is to STEM inquiry. And they have the Institute for Inquiry. These are great resources specifically for the informal education setting. And the models really focus on providing experiences for youth to stimulate thinking and provoke questions to develop the logical thinking skills. And so they really focus on just the open-ended questions, and then they actually have some activities listed and different approaches to take. So those are 2 great resources to look into for your site. And we do have a question here in Emeryville.
Hi, I was just wondering, how does the inquiry model fold into the Common Core?
That's a great question, and I'm going to let Bruce answer that.
It folds into the Common Core in the way that a lot of you talked about in the statements that you made when we were asking questions about inquiry and things that we know about inquiry, because the Common Core is really forcing for the school day teachers the direction that we're talking about, which is for teachers to be facilitators and co-learners and not to be standing in the front of the room and lecturing with the kids. So this model of facilitation instead of the dissemination of knowledge is what the Common Core is all about, and next generation science standards as well. We also have a question in Monterey.
Okay, great. Monterey, you have a question?
I was wondering if you had ever had an experience where you've asked one of these open-ended questions. Let's say, what do you guys know about chocolate? And you have kids that say nothing. I don't know. You have a whole group of too shy to participate students, because I know I've run into that and then had to kind of backtrack and ask other questions, and just wanted your input on situations where the kids aren't forthcoming in engaging in dialogue.
That's a great question, and I'm going to say it's not against the law to ask an open-ended question. A closed-ended question. So I would say, who here has ever had chocolate? And you'll see who raises their hand, and you can start with those young people and be like, oh, when was the last time you had chocolate? And really just start to engage them on that level before they become overwhelmed with like this huge open-ended question that they don't know what answer you're looking for, because some youth really want to give the right answer. I know I was that young person. Well, I'm not going to answer if I don't know the right answer. And so you want to, you can ask the closed-ended question so that you can get the yes or no's. And if nobody's ever had chocolate, send those kids to me in my program, because I want them, low energy kids. And so it's okay to ask the closed-ended questions if you know you have a group of students that's going to be hard to engage them initially. I wouldn't stick to the closed-ended questions because it doesn't leave that opportunity for them to be to lead the activity and go throughout the process of inquiry. But I would say it's definitely okay to start with or have a couple of closed-ended questions. We had a question in Alameda.
Hi. First, we have a comment. Our group earlier was talking when they were brainstorming about inquiry, and they were mentioning pair shares. So just to remind people, there are different strategies. You don't necessarily start with a whole group with open-ended questions. You may want to train kids. You have to train them to turn to a partner and then share out, because it's a less threatening situation. And I think our group that's what they were thinking about when they got to this. It's one of the strategies with English language learners to have small groupings, drawing. There's all kinds of ways to get kids thinking and then share later. And then I was just going to say that Common Core, I think the message from the state after school division is pretty clear that the way after school is going to be aligned with Common Core is through the learning and after school and summer principles, which you're going to be getting to in this presentation. So Common Core and learning and after school principles are closely aligned. Okay.
Great. Yes, thank you. And going back to the pairing strategy, so inquiry-based, you can't just start your first day. This is the first day you meet these young people and you just go into asking questions. You want to follow the model of, setting up a safe space, having your group agreements, making sure there's some team building and getting to know you activities. And throughout the process, then you go into the inquiry-based once you get into the curriculum and the activities that are in your program. And there are a lot of pairing strategies out there, and there are a lot of intentional ways to build that space to where young people start to feel comfortable to ask questions and take charge of their own learning, essentially. So thank you, Alameda County, for bringing up that point. Great. I don't see any more questions.
Nope.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move into the 5E instructional model. And this is a resource from NASA. And with the 5E instructional model, it's a super simple framework, but very powerful in supporting the cycle of learning to help students build on their own understanding and from their personal experiences and connecting it with new ideas and that whole scaffolding piece. And so what we're going to do is, as I go through each of the E's, I want you to think about how this is evident in your programs. And we're going to go through, and I'm just going to ask each site to share maybe one thing that they do in their program that relates to the 5E instructional model. So as we go through each E one more time, then please be prepared to share, anyone can share, any one person, how your program is already implementing some of the ideas from the 5E instructional model. And so we are going to go on to slide 7. Which is the first E, and that is engage. And so the purpose of the engage stage is to pique student interest and get them personally involved in the lesson while pre-assessing their prior understanding. So we did that in the first activity with what you already know. And to engage, the engage stage is that initial student interest. And so you need to hit the floor running, essentially, is what the engage stage is for. You want to make sure that you have something prepared to where the students are initially, they just go in. One activity we do with our middle school program is we have them work on networks and how different communication tools work together in different layouts. And so the first activity we do is we bring cell phones and we just have them take them apart. Like, that's the first thing we do. And we have them write any questions that they have about how to, like, the process of taking it apart, what they see, what they're curious about, because they're like, what, I can take a cell phone apart? And we're like, yeah, just take it apart and see what you find. And initially we see that they're kind of like, well, I'm not allowed to take apart things at home. And we really encourage them just to go in, and that's how we get them engaged initially, because it's just like, this is something that's cool. This is something you're letting me do. There's no rules, no boundaries. And so just having something that will get their interest immediately. And that's a great strategy also to get them feeling comfortable, because sometimes in STEM it could be really daunting. I know for me as an adult it is, or it can be. And so we want to make sure that we don't even let students get the opportunity to think like, oh, science or oh, technology. We want them to just engage immediately. And this is also, the engage piece is also where scaffolding comes into play. It's a little bit harder with the younger kids, the lower elementary, but once you get into upper elementary, middle school, and high school, you're able to relate it to something they already know or something they've already done, and that gets their interest, because it's like, oh, I already know this. I've done something around this. I know a lot about snails. I know a lot about chocolate. And so when you use that scaffolding piece of something they've learned already, then it helps them to engage in the beginning as well. So the next, slide 8, is explore. And the purpose of the Explore stage is to get students involved in the topic, providing them with a chance to build their own understanding. And so this stage is where guiding and inquiry really comes into action. You really see this happening because this is where the introduction is given and the facilitator really allows students to actively learn at their own pace. And it drives the process, of course, with guidance. And we keep going back to that. We want to make sure that a facilitator is prepared to guide, but still asking questions. Moving on to slide 9, the explain stage. The purpose for the explain stage is to provide students with an opportunity to communicate what they have learned so far and figure out what it means. And so this can be, again, these things can, for example, the explain, if you go through the engage piece and there's an opportunity for explaining, then you can go into it immediately. This is just a model that you can use. And so the explain stage is where vocabulary really becomes important. And this is where ideas become concepts, and also where misconceptions are redirected because they talk about things that they've learned already, and this is where you're able to clarify for them. This is where you're able to relate it to your goals and your outcomes and your objectives. And again, vocabulary is really important during the explain because if a student is saying something, you can rephrase it using the vocabulary you want them to learn. Not saying that they're wrong, not saying they missed something, but just re-explaining or restating what they're saying with the vocabulary that you want them to begin to use. The next slide 10 is extend and elaborate. Extend or elaborate. And the purpose of the extend stage is to allow students to use their new knowledge and continue to explore its implications. And so this is the real world application step. How does this relate to the real world? We want to make sure that as out of school time, informal education, summer education, that this is where it comes into, this is what you're learning in the classroom. How does it apply out of the classroom? Because that's when the inquiry is taken outside of your program and applied to their everyday lives. And then they begin to, somebody had that question of how do you get them to take this questioning and this inquiry outside of your programs, and this is how you relate it to the real world. You relate it to things that are real for them, things that are relatable for them, and things that they're experiencing outside of your program. And this is where you put it into context, and this is where you're able to also expose them to new situations and opportunities. The last one is evaluate, slide 11. The purpose of the evaluation stage is for both students and teachers to determine how much learning and understanding has taken place, and also as an instructor what still needs to be revisited. And so in this step, it doesn't have to be saved for the end. I want to highlight that. You can evaluate throughout the entire process and see what students are understanding, what they're really grasping, and also what needs to be re-explained, what questions you need to ask to reiterate concepts, to emphasize vocabulary. And you can use both quantitative and qualitative tools to measure, and you can use both formal and informal tools to measure. And so I want to save all the examples for when you all share, but something we do is our direct service staff, they do checkouts at the end of the day, they do their processing at the end of each lesson, and that's when they're really able to see and gauge what the students are learning. We also have formal tools where we have pre and post surveys that you do. There's a certain age range that you can do pre and post surveys with. You can't do pre and post surveys with the kindergartner necessarily. And so you want to make sure that the tools are age appropriate. And you want to make sure that the tools are going to evaluate what you're actually doing in program, because if the tools are evaluating a concept that you haven't introduced in program, then the tool is not going to be helpful or successful. So you want to make sure that the tools are actually in line with what you're implementing in program. It's a lot of talking. All right, so what we're going to do, so again, the 5 E's are, sorry, I'm going through all my papers. So we have engage, explore, explain, extend, and evaluate. So we're going to go through each site, and if anyone can share how or what this looks like in your program. If there's any one stage that you have an example of what it looks like in your programming, then we would love to hear it. All right, and we will start with Monterey.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. We were going to ask not to go first this time.
I can
But does
start
anyone
from
have
bottom.
anything at the moment they want to share? We're still thinking. Can we
Okay, so
pass
we'll
for
go-
now? We're still
yes.
thinking.
Well, actually, do you want to just go down the list or go backwards?
Let's go backwards.
Okay, we'll go backwards. Emeryville, get ready. So we're going to start with Solano.
Sure. Anything.
I guess like when we were learning about the presidents, we asked the kids what they knew about.
Can you speak up? We can
you
barely
guys-
hear
Can
you.
you just come up a little bit and
I guess when we learned about presidents, we kind of engaged the kids to know what they knew about any of the presidents.
okay. Anybody else? Elaine, I'm sure you have some really good ideas.
One thing we do with our kids, we have hot topics, and so we get into discussing what's going on with them, academically, socially, or whatever have you, and we try to pique their interest by doing certain activities in after-school programs to kind of follow that up, and some of them get really into it because that's what they see and that's what's going on. We do a lot of debates. And so one debate that we did do with the students was the popular taking of cell phones. And so out of that, students are still writing some essays on their should teachers, administrators be allowed to confiscate a cell phone if you record a fight or if it's just out. You know what I mean? So we did a lot of the freedom of speech, search and seizure. We were going into the Bill of Rights with them in that school.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's it.
Thank you, Solano. Emeryville.
Who wants to share, guys?
I'll share. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
So in Berkeley, coming up beginning of March, we have College and Career Day. As coordinators, we've talked about our plans on how we want to implement this into our programs. I've talked with my staff, but the way we're going to do it at our school starting this week is we're going to ask the kids what type of jobs they're interested in, what type of schools they're interested in, so we get them engaged before we get started with, I guess, what we kind of envision.
Great. Anybody else? I just want to make one quick point also, which is that I think it's interesting that the people who have chosen to share so far have been sharing about topics other than science, which is great. The process of inquiry can be used for lots of different topics. The process of engaging, evaluating, extending, all of those different steps can be done with lots of different topics, not just with science. So who's next?
Okay. All right, San Francisco.
I know for my program we use magic to really engage the kids and trying to use science with the magic and in a fun way.
Great. Thank you.
I have another one to share just about engagement. Sometimes putting something down in front of kids and not telling them anything like, I don't know, a specimen of something that they haven't seen or a material that they've never seen. And just by putting it down in front of them and not saying anything, the questions just start coming up. What is that? Like, where'd you get that? How'd you make that? What does it weigh? What is it made out of? Or, you know, I've seen one of those before, or no, I haven't. And then the conversations and the questions come.
Thank you, San Francisco. Alameda County?
Hi. We got somebody coming up.
So our one of the curriculum that we have here for YEP is the science kits. They were done by Lawrence Hall of Science. I really like them. It's easy for me to engage my students when I have all my materials and everything prepared in those bins. But we did an activity where I demoed a experiment, and then I had the students break off in groups, and they had to replicate the experiment themselves, so they had to work together. So I really liked it because it's easy for me to allow them to explore. They're really eager because they saw that I could do it, and they wanted to try them on their own. So that's.
Thank you. Anybody else? And I think you were talking about the kids' science kits that were developed. So on the handout, on that yellow handout that at least our group got, there are videos.
Not yellow for everybody.
Pardon?
Not yellow for everybody. Everybody
Not
got
yellow,
it, but it's
okay.
not yellow for everybody.
A handout that says Inquiry Learning Recommended Video Clips. So Lawrence Hall of Science and Developmental Studies Center have videos that you can watch that show, you know, engaging kids, asking open-ended questions. There's a little video about how people learn, and they're not attached to those particular kids' science kits. These are just general good practices, so I just wanted to highlight those. Anybody else? Okay.
Oh, there is. I don't know who this.
That's Santa Clara.
Okay, Santa Clara has a question, and then we'll move on to San Mateo.
Santa Clara is prepared to share out, but we are a very large group of people, and it is moving too fast for us to have meaningful conversation in between these activities. So if there's some way you could give us a few extra minutes so that we can really be there with you on the activities, it would be wonderful. We're over 35.
Oh.
Okay, thanks, Julie, for letting us know.
And Marissa is going to share now, if that's okay with you all.
That's great.
Okay, so I'm with Beyond the Bell in Mountain View, and one of the areas I feel that our Beyond the Bell addressed was the engaged portion of it. My area is basically the 60 students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders going to the computer lab, and I'm myself and another set of teachers were supposed to present a science or math or technology-based activity, and initially we were having a bit of problem making that connection. It's a long day for them. They come after school. There's a component where they do a physical part with the city, and when they get to us, we're supposed to present them with math and science. And they're tired from the day, so we were having a little bit of problem making that connection. So we kind of went on a different tangent, and like you said, we engaged them. One of the more successful activities we did was the lemon powered battery science activity, where we basically brought in a lot of pennies, copper pennies, and different size lemons, connectors, and LCD lights. And we presented them with an idea of you can actually make a battery out of lemons with connectors and pennies. And so we didn't tell them how to do it. We basically, for those that were very gutsy enough to try it on their own, they started experimenting with it. They had some kids who actually got into groups. It was highly successful because they basically had the materials, and we just kind of like that activity about was it chocolate and snail. We basically said, okay, here's the material. Let's be scientists. Let's do this, and they really got into it. We had little kids that were very excited to get their project with the LCD lights turned on. Even we have quite a bit of students who have the English Spanish area, and what is the ELD we talked about, and we saw a lot of those students really getting turned on to science, which I was very excited about.
that also sparked the light where they're actually asking for more activities like that. One of the things we'd like to do is do the solar-powered cars. So I like the fact that a lot of these students that were not turned on to science were able to get a glimpse of it by just trying it out. So that's what Beyond the Valley and Mountain View did, Plimpton.
Thank you. And thank you, Santa Clara, for also bringing it to our attention that you have so many folks over there. I appreciate you all. We'll slow down. All right, San Mateo.
We have Mouse Squad, and it's actually an option for the children to be in the program or not. So what we do to pique their interest is show a video of Mouse Squad and all the interesting things related to computers and how they can build and break down a computer. And computers are not just for video games, Facebook, and YouTube, and all the great things that go along with computers. So that seems to work pretty well.
Great, great. Thank you. And Monterey.
What we do at our site is our older kids between 4th and 6th grade, we bring in a special science teacher that has a project for them to do. One of the more interesting things that we've done recently is the kids got to make their own speaker with something simple like a couple of wires, a jack, a paper cup, some magnets, and rubber bands, and they got to see how electronics really aren't very complicated, or at least a speaker isn't. They got to, fix it themselves and jack it into their own phone and listen to their music. It was something that they actually created on their own. And it's funny because at the beginning, a lot of the kids are usually complaining about going to science, but once they get there and they see the project, they're completely involved. And it's something that's really great for us because it keeps them engaged, and it actually makes them curious because they're always wondering what the project will be, the next week.
Great. Thank you, Monterey. And so as we went through this, a lot of people use the word engage, but everybody, we really touched on a lot of the stages, even though I think a common word is engage, to engage students, to engage them in the learning, engage them in the activity, but we really touched on a lot of the different stages. And so what I'm actually going to ask is that in your groups, let's take about 5 minutes to talk about which of these stages is maybe the most challenging to incorporate into our program. I know that as we're not all direct service folks, and so thinking about your frontline staff and the youth that you work with, what is one of the stages that might be a little more challenging if you use this model, if you incorporate this model into your programming? What might be one of the most challenging stages, or the stage that might be a little bit harder to incorporate into your programming? And also, since we have so much experience in the room, if you can all kind of talk about what strategies you might use as well to incorporate that stage into your program. So again, let's take about 5 minutes to talk about why or which stage might be more challenging and some strategies to incorporate it into your program. And then after that, we will take a brief break. So let's take about 5 minutes.
Okay, we are at 10:34, so we gave you a few extra minutes, but we should go ahead and get back to it so we can get done on time this morning. So we'll give everybody a few moments to take their seats again, and then we'll get started.
You ready?
Yeah, I think we should go.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to jump right into slide 12. We're going to go into the learning and after school principles. And for those of you who were in workshop 1, we went a little more in depth in the learning and after school principles, and we're going to only go over 2 today, pertaining to inquiry-based learning, going back to what we're doing today. So for the learning and after school and summer project, it really emphasizes out of school time programs achieving their full potential. So it's really focused on going beyond going beyond compliance and looking more of just mastering what we do in out of school time. And so we want to make sure that out of school time is known as an important place of learning in a way that complements the school day. And that's when you go into the, doing the activities that really complement the standards and meet standards, and really making sure that you're supporting what they're learning in school day and making it fun and engaging for these young people. And you're also supporting what goes on or doesn't go on at home. So I know I work primarily out of Oakland public schools, and so really making sure that that we are complementing what happens during the school day and kind of making up for the education that does or doesn't continue in the home. And so that's one thing that we really focus on. Can everyone hear?
I think that we weren't on. I think we have to go back.
Because everybody's still talking.
Yeah. Sorry, we had ourselves muted here. We're going to go back. We'll start back again.
All right. Let's wave our hands if we hear me. Perfect.
Yay!
Done that the first time. So we'll try this again. Emeryville gets to hear it twice. And so we're going to talk about the learning and after school principles. And if you were in workshop 1, then you went into all of the learning and after school principles. And today we're only going to focus on 2 of them. We are on slide 12 if you're following along in the PowerPoint handout. And so the learning and after school and summer project really emphasizes out of school time, achieving their full potential, and really going beyond compliance and really focusing on quality programming. And we want to make sure that the out of school time, whether it's after school or summer learning, is it's something that complements the school day learning and also supplements what is or isn't at home, because we primary educators, encouraging that, and also the school day. We're complementing what happens during the school day. And I don't know when we were unmuted, but something I was saying that I work primarily in Oakland public schools, and we really want to make sure that we know what is and isn't going on at home. My site coordinators are responsible for having constant communication with families and parents to making sure that we're taking a holistic approach and everybody's responsible of some aspect for these young people, the teachers in the school day, the parents, and making sure that the education and things that they're learning in our out of school time is being is in practice at home, and then we provide that that engagement, that fun, that sparking curiosity, and helping them to become their own learners and taking charge of their own education. And so we're going to go into learning that is active. So go ahead and go to slide 14. And so learning that is active, I'm not going to read this. This is just for your own reference. So this active learning is really imperative in the work that we do as out-of-school time providers, because with inquiry-based learning, especially in STEM education, it supports STEM educators in understanding that it's not about knowing the answers. It's really about asking questions, looking for answers with their young people, not for the young people that you're working with. And also, it's not to say that you go into program ill-prepared or with no questions or with no knowledge of what you're looking to facilitate, but you want to make sure that your program participants are really active and a part of the learning process with you. I think that makes being an out-of-school educator really fun for our direct service and frontline staff. And we want it to be fun for them, because then they're able to communicate that with the young people. Like, I don't know about you all, but when I go to trainings or workshops, and if the facilitator, it's really, I can do it because I'm an adult, but it's not fun to have to look past the person into the content. You want to be able to engage with the facilitator. You want to be able to, see their passion and see their excitement, because then you become excited. Even if you don't know what in the world they're talking about, you're like, I want to learn more because they look excited. And so we want our direct service staff, our frontline staff, to be able to express that to these young people as well. So we want them to be excited, and a way that they can do that is making sure that we emphasize that they don't have to be experts, and that we want to make sure that it's as active, as engaging, as hands-on as possible. And in our program at Girls Inc., we really take the youth development. It's ingrained in our approach to make sure that there's skill building, that there's relationship building, that there's the community involvement piece, so they feel connected to what's going on, whether it's their classroom community, the school community, the after-school program community, their city. So making sure that they really feel engaged, and all of this is done through the inquiry-based learning. We're asking them questions, helping them to connect or figure out how they're connected to their community, figure out the skills they want to learn, figure out the things that they want to get from this opportunity, and also, again, to see what they already know. And so let's move to the next one, which learning is collaborative. Let's go to slide 16. And so the collaboration piece is something that is ingrained in the after-school culture in most after-school programs. And it's where we really want to encourage students to become dependent on the group and have accountability to the group. And like we talked about at the beginning, this is really where the safe space comes into play. Because if I don't feel safe and comfortable with the students in my group, it's going to be really hard for me to depend on them to learn. It's really going to be hard for me to want to listen to what they have to say, feel comfortable enough to ask questions that I have. And once you see that transition going from a group of students who are coming together to a group of students who are learning together and collaborating and working on projects together and asking each other questions to find the solution, then you really see that shift in the group dynamic. And so something we do in our STEM programming is we do project-based learning, and so every project you have to work on with, we call them design teams in our STEM programming. And we relate that to the real world when we go on our field trips, like we're going to Pandora, we go to Cisco every year, we're going to Autodesk this year in San Francisco, we go to Intel. So all of these things, we make sure they emphasize the importance of working in a team, depending on others, use the collaborative effort. And so our girls see that we're not just mean and making them be in pairs in program, but this is something that a skill that they're going to have to use in the real world. And it's when you're working with STEM professionals, they're very open to incorporating the things that you have in your program on these field trips and in these opportunities. And you'd be surprised how many resources that they have if you have limited resources in your program. A lot of them are very open to, reimbursing you for transportation and providing snacks for your students, and either doing it during school day hours or after school hours. So they're very eager, and they have a lot of resources to be able to support these efforts, and just making sure that you also are collaborating and building those relationships with these STEM professionals to incorporate this into your program. And we also prepare our students with asking questions to get the information they want to know. And our students, they always ask, how much money do you make? And we always prepare the STEM professionals you could say what you do with your money, not actually how much money you make. We actually had one woman that was very open to answering that question. And our girls were like, what, $1.50? We're like, no, she didn't say that. She definitely said 150. So they're just like, they're like, I don't understand. So we encourage girls to ask all of the questions that they have, because then also it sparks their interest in, I can do this, I can become a STEM professional, because ultimately that's our goal, is for them to be able to know that they can do it. Not that they have to do it, but that they have the potential and they have the capacity to be able to do these things. And so they become the inquirers. They start to ask these open-ended questions because they want the answers at this point. And that's something that you develop over time and build over time, because they start to see the benefit in collaborating and getting this information for themselves. And it takes a while. I'm not going to say it's overnight, and that, you know, you come in, you ask these open-ended questions in your program, and then the next day they become these experts that just know how to ask questions and come to their own solution. It's definitely a process that as adults we model for them, and they start to see that. One of my students is always like, how come you can't just give me the answer to things? And so that's when I know I'm doing my job. When they know I'm not giving them all the answers, that's how I know that I'm being effective and I'm giving them the tools they need to be successful. Any questions about those two principles in the learning and after school model? I don't see any questions. Perfect. Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to share, we had an interesting conversation in here just before the break about the learning and after school principles, and through working on this project I've gotten to know some of the people who came up with these principles, and I think that this is a really exciting time for after school because these principles, as Kourtney said, are all about increasing quality in after school, and they're all about making after school substantively different than what happens during the school day. I have 2 school-age kids who go to school in the schools that some of these folks work in, and I can tell you that their after-school programs are already substantively different. And one of the ways that they're most different, and one of the ways that my kids, who talk as much as their father, really love, is that they really encourage collaboration, which for whatever reason during the school day they don't get an opportunity to do. So I just wanted to give a shout out there that those of you out there who are taking these principles to heart, you're already doing great work, and keep it up. And this is an exciting time.
Great. All right, so we're going to go into another activity. So if you look on slide 17, it just says open-ended questions with a whole bunch of question marks. And so what you're going to do in your groups is you are going to pick a STEM-related topic. It could be about snails and chocolate. It can be about oobleck. It can be about bubbles. It can be about surface tension. It could be about networks. You're going to pick a topic in your group, and you're going to have a good amount of time to do this. And you are going to figure out one thing that you want your students to learn. Okay, so if it's about snails, you want them to learn that snails eat chocolate. Let's just as an example. I'm not saying snails eat chocolate. It's just an example. And so I really like that example. Thank you for bringing that up at the very beginning. And what we're going to do is after you come up with your topic and one thing that you want the students to learn, your group is going to come up with a series of open-ended questions that will support that topic and what you want your students to learn. So this is practice to be able to, let's say you're going into program and you need to be able to, you start off with the know, wonder, learn model, and then you go into your program. You want to have open-ended questions that support what you're learning and what you, the topic and what you want your students to learn. And we have a question in Alameda County.
Hi, my question is, so does the content have to be like, are we saying pure science content or technology or mathematics, or could it be questions about careers? And I know we have a group of high school people here who are thinking about what is the best way to bring in STEM with staff that's most high school after school programs have staff that have other areas of expertise. That's what they do. It might be performing arts or so how broad is the question or the content that we're asking questions about?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to ask that it's STEM. I'm going to ask that it's science, technology, engineering, or math, and you can do careers. You can do STEM careers as your topic.
All right.
But let's stick to STEM for now. And we have another question.
Monterey.
In Monterey.
We were just wondering if you could give us an example of an open-ended question versus a closed-ended, or another example. I know you stated one before, but it would be helpful just to get our juices flowing on the types of questions that you're looking for.
Thank you for that. And so we want to make sure that all of these questions do not have a yes or no answer. So you want to ask the questions of who, what, when, where, and why. That's a great model to think about when you're preparing open-ended questions. You want to stay away from do, does, because those kind of give you the yes or no answers, and your young people will jump on yes or no answers and call it a day. So you really want to make sure that you're sticking to the questions that are going to give you some meat. So so any questions, and if you have a question that is yes or no, then work with your group to figure out how to change that reword it into an open-ended question.
So for example, to use the example we were talking about earlier, if you wanted to know if snails eat chocolate, instead of asking the question, do snails eat chocolate, you might ask the question, I wonder what snails eat. Which does have an answer, but it's much more open-ended because we're looking at the whole spread of things that they could possibly eat. You also might ask, how could we find out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I like examples of the sun. So you could say, does the sun make you hot? That's yes or no. How does the sun make you feel? Or what does it feel like when you're sitting in the sun all day? So then they can start to think, oh, well, it's hot. Oh, if there's no clouds and it's windy, it might be a little bit cold. So those will give you different answers. So you want to be able to, if you do have a yes or no question, share it and then work with your group to try and change that into an open-ended question.
Is it okay for them to break their groups into smaller groups?
And if you have a large group, yes, please feel free to break into smaller groups and do this activity in separate, smaller groups. So we're going to take 15 minutes to work on this. And then if you need more time, I'll do a check-in with about 5 minutes left to see if you need more time or not. Great.
It's got to.
All right, so let's take about 5 more minutes to work on this. Let's take about 5 more minutes. All right, so let's wrap up our conversations and take a couple minutes to come back together. Are we unmuted?
We're unmuted.
Okay. Because people are still Okay, we can. Thank you. All right.
We can go in a random order this time if you want.
Yeah, we're gonna do random. So can you wave your hands if you can hear me? Perfect. All right. So we're gonna go in a random order this time. Just gonna point my finger, close my eyes and point the finger. And if we can have, I know some of us did more than one group. So if we could have you pick one of the topics to share. So if your group did maybe 3 different small groups, if you can just pick one group to share back, then we will go ahead and start. And we will start with Alameda County.
I don't know if they. Oh, here they go.
We're a little shy.
Can you come back to us?
Yes, Alameda County. I will come back to you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's go to Solano.
Yeah, go ahead. Come on.
Okay, our STEM project was on eclipse, and we have what causes eclipses of the sun or moon, how often do eclipses occur, why can't we watch an eclipse of the sun, why is an eclipse visible in some parts of the world and not others, how long does an eclipse last, why does it get dark during an eclipse? And then another question was posed, if you do not have the technology in the classrooms, and so we came up with the wonderful cell phone and Google how we can put in the word eclipse and have possible subjects and sites, and then another person said you can actually give them some credible sites to go on to find the information. So that's our STEM project on eclipse.
And what would you, and Solano, what would you want your group to, your young people to walk away with from that session?
You would want them to walk away from the full identity of what an eclipse is actually is, when it occurs, how often does it occur, how long does it take, have you timed it or whatever, because this came up at the last eclipse and we have this going on. So what they did was we made it a game really, where it was 2 different groups, and one group, what they did was Google it, and every question that's on that board is in your Google, exactly as it is there. So the kids would go back and forth, and I gave them 2 hours to do it. They had the answers in an hour. And if you don't believe it, Google it.
There's an app for that.
Perfect. No more encyclopedias, huh? Okay. Thank you very much, Solano. Let's go to San Francisco.
Why can't we look at eclipse? There's an answer.
Yeah, I know. I didn't get that either. Didn't they just call on us?
I don't know.
Yeah, San Francisco.
We had a question about the last activity a little bit. We were just sort of wondering about maybe can you guys comment on that? Like, we were wondering about the just the open-ended questions a little bit. We were writing down open-ended questions to try to guide the kids in the inquiry.
And so you're looking for.
We were just hearing. Oh, or not. We can share. I'm happy to read what we wrote.
Sorry, we were just having a brief conversation about that.
So, hang on one sec. So I guess my question in answer to Sarah's question is, so if you can find the answer to it by looking on Google, is it really an open-ended question? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to help the kids figure out, we're trying to ask them questions where they have to observe something or look at something or do something to find the answers to what we're looking for. So we might try, instead of asking, I'm struggling for rephrasing some of those questions about the eclipses. Is that what you're talking about, Sarah? Yeah. Give us a minute and we'll come back to that one. Can you guys share your project while we're thinking about it? Okay, great. You guys are on.
Okay, great. We were talking about the topic of cooking, the science of cooking. And we thought that the fact or the learning goal, like what we want kids to walk away with from the project, was just a better understanding of the different ingredients in recipes and what those ingredients do, like why those ingredients are in the recipe, which could lead to better understanding of like amounts of things, nutrition of things, chemical reactions of things. So that was sort of like the learning goal of this. So to start the activity, we were thinking about like just how to open-ended questions just to start an activity like this. And we said, we wrote, what's your favorite cookie? Anyone know what ingredients are in cookies? Why is your favorite cookie your favorite one? What makes it so good? What do you think would happen if we changed or left out an ingredient in your favorite cookie? So imagine that we had none of that ingredient in the world. What do you think we could do, or what do you think would happen to your recipe? And then for the middle part of the activity, we wrote, came up with questions to help the kids figure out like how to take the activity into an experimental phase. So we wrote the question like, how many batches do you think we'll have to make in order to find out the effects of each ingredient? How do you think we should go about investigating the effects of each ingredient in the recipe? And then these are my favorite. The open-ending questions, like once the kids have made all of their different recipes, open-ended questions to begin this part would be like, so how does it smell? How does it taste? What's the texture? What does it look like? How do they compare? And then how do we decide which one is the best? Like which recipe?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we are going to come back, San Francisco, to your question. We're not going to forget about you. We wrote it down, and we'll come back to it as soon as we're done. Everybody's done sharing. Okay. Yeah. San Mateo?
So we started our conversation on a fourth grade Common Core science standard, or proposed science standard that had to do with storing electricity, which brought us back to this battery lemon again. And some of the open-ended questions that we came up with were, what are batteries and how does it work? How long will the battery last and why? What is a battery? And then we had a conversation around that end about, making sure that our staff knew to sort of keep it about batteries, because the conversation could quickly become about fossil fuels, about what's electricity and where does electricity come from. So about the dangers of all these branching questions and not wanting to get too far afield from the topic. And then also, what else could you use batteries for? What might be the costs or the repercussions of using batteries for older kids who understand that sort of stuff? So we had some great conversation around that.
Thank you. And I appreciate. Oh, I see. Hello. Okay. I appreciate that you did know the direction that it could go into, and you kind of prepared yourself to avoid going into those directions that you weren't focused on. So I appreciate that you even acknowledge that that's the process that you all went through, because that's a skill to think about your group, the group dynamic, and to think about what direction it could go in, or the interest that the students have, or what places they might take it, just because they're kids, they're youth, they're young people. And so I do appreciate that you named that was part of your process. Emeryville.
Oh. Hang on. Where are we? We're all the way up at the top. Okay. Do you guys want to share yours? The hairdryer group? I love your questions. I can read them if nobody else wants to read them. So their science topic was a hairdryer, and part of the reason that I like it so much is because it's something really concrete and really common. It doesn't cost extra money. Chances are you could find one lying around. And so their questions were, how can you improve the hairdryer? And following up on that, what would improve a hairdryer? And the objective would be to figure out the purpose of a hairdryer. And then also a third question was, how do the components of this hairdryer relate to each other? And then they suggested that what would actually happen then is kids would probably take the hairdryer apart and try to figure out what's in it and how they're related to different things. And then their fourth question is, what skills are needed for designing a hairdryer? They would bring in different types of hairdryers, have students share hairdryer experiences. And my favorite, their last question is, how would boys use hairdryers?
Great.
Good job.
Good job, Emeryville. All right, Santa Clara.
I think if you just stand right around here.
Okay, all right. So our topic was engineering of common spaces, and the objective that we want our students to learn is that we wanted them to understand that the design of areas can drive human behaviors. So what we'd ask them is, can you describe a time that you went to a park that you really enjoyed? What were some things that it had? What were some things that were missing? What did you do when you were there? Can you describe a time that you went to a park that you didn't really enjoy? What was missing? What did you do? What would happen if we built parks with no pads underneath them? What would happen if we built parks with playgrounds that were so tall that kids couldn't go on them? What would we do if we built parks with different types of playground structures for everyone's size? What would happen if we doubled the size of the park? What would happen if we cut the size of the park in half? What would happen if we built parks right next to schools? What would happen if we built them way far away from the town? What would happen if parks had, signs in multiple languages? What would happen if parks didn't have signs in multiple languages? Another one we talked about was, what would happen if we painted the playgrounds really nice and beautiful? And then what do you think would happen if we didn't even take care of the playgrounds or parks? And so those are some of the questions that we came up with.
Good job. And I appreciated that was really basic, and then you can change the questions or tweak the questions a little bit if you're using the same topic for high school, for example, because you would talk about the community impact and do all of those things. So I like that you started with very basic questions to spark interest, and then if you have older students, you can definitely tweak those questions to engage them on a different level, or you could even see the skill level of your group and change the questions based on the answers they start to give and how to make those questions engaging in a different way. Thank you. Monterey, and then Alameda, be ready. It's almost you. Monterey County.
Okay, earlier, one of the programs shared that they had actually built speakers out of common materials with cup and wire, and so we kind of went back. There was some interest in learning a little bit more about that activity. So the topic was, of course, the audio technology, and the central question being, how do speakers transmit sound? And so our discussion really focused on the 5E instructional model. So we were kind of looking first at how do we engage and what types of questions might we want to ask during that phase of discovery, for example. And so we thought we might start with a closed-ended question, which is really a duh, but just to engage them. Has anyone ever listened to music? You know, that of course, you know, we know that kids listen to music. And so that would be an initial way to engage them, along with seeing the model that was already built so that they could first get an idea and sense of what it is that they were going to be building themselves. And so going off of, what do you know? What do you know about speakers? Asking them, how do you think this cup transmits sound? Then looking as we moved into exploration phase, and as they got pieces of the model that they were going to construct, we might ask questions like, how do you think these pieces go together? And then hopefully having the students participate in the design of the pieces coming together first, and maybe doing some writing about how they think it might work before they actually put it together. And then, of course, once we get into the construction phase, what happens when you change the order or a hole in the cup is not symmetrical? These are questions based on real life experience of the kids who actually went through this project. So anyway, we talked about making sure that we're asking questions back to them about what did they do in construction of the project, what did they learn from that experience, not automatically giving an answer as to why something might work or not work, but asking them to really answer that question for themselves, or even doing some small group work or pair sharing so that they can really talk to each other. What did you try? How did it go for you? Things like that. So we were trying to structure the conversation a little bit with how could we, if we were going to set this up systematically with the 5E instructional model, what types of questions might we ask for each of those phases?